Look, just an investigation, it appears, about their recruitment of Jaden Rashada, the contract that they allegedly put in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, why do I feel like this is coming from the Jaden Rashada camp and more than the NCAA poking around? Like, why do I feel like this feels to me like, are they going to try to sue for some legal action behind all of this?
I don't think that necessarily that this is going to lead. I don't really think it's necessarily Rashada. I think that because this was the NCAA has to do something about this because it was so publicly front facing. This was so highly covered. This was covered by every major outlet in full detail, breaking down everything that was happening, the inability to reach an agreement and to also fulfill the requirements of what was offered to him. All of this was talked about. We knew what happened. We knew that he wasn't given what he was promised, and that was why he asked out of his NLI, and that was why he ended up at Arizona State. Probably better for him than to be in that toxic situation. The handling of this was clearly not legally and ethically done by Florida, and that was what led to the problems that we're currently at. I know Florida fans probably are going to come out and say, that's a bunch of BS. We didn't do anything wrong. But they have, over the past year, gotten in trouble for handlings of NIL. One of the other examples, too, is I believe it was Gervion Dexter. There was a story published that really didn't get covered a lot, that apparently he signed an NIL deal without reading all the way through it that promised the collective portions of his NFL contract, which is bullshit. That's completely ridiculous bullshit.
Right.
I wonder if all of this is tied together, their handlings, the way that they're trying to manipulate and take advantage of these kids. It's not great. I'm not putting any of this on Billy because I don't know his level of involvement, but it's not great. And I'm worried about this timeline here on how it's going to affect his, potential final year at Florida.
You brought up the point that I was going to bring up in reference to Dexter because not a lot of people talked about it. It was 5 years of his next future earnings, and remember, had to sue to get out of it.
Yeah,
that's a really good point that you brought up there that not a lot of people will remember. I do bring up one point that I want to say because I should have said it on our last show on Sunday, but didn't. Okay, Joe, every time, all right, we have a scandal of cheating. The big topic that I always hear, is, everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing it. That's such a lazy excuse because just because everybody else is doing it, everybody else breaks the law, speeding, okay? But it's the person that gets caught, all right, that was blatantly out there doing it. My point in all this with Florida is, this is the second time you've had an NIL issue, okay? So now I have to take it, Joe, for me, at the 20,000-foot approach. Here's why. Because Billy on the field can be one thing. Like Billy on the field, the chaos that's on the field, the special teams issues that they had this year. Joe, remember in week 1 when they had to go up against Utah and they had the same two players with the same number?
Yep.
It's one thing for Billy to have that on the field. It's something completely different when you're having issues in NIL. When Billy doesn't really have all of the – Billy says, hey, I need $150,000. He's not writing the contracts. He's not the booster or the guy running their NIL or collective that's doing all this kind of stuff. Florida has an issue, in my opinion, from an entire athletic department. This the way that I look at it. Joe, this is multiple times that the same AD has hired coaches that are looking like they're going to be fired. Now, they renovated their baseball stadium. They have money. Their baseball school was in the national championship this year. Like, Florida to me, Joe, when I was growing up, in a place that I think it always can be, it's the biggest sleeping giant in college football. It literally is. Like, Joe, if Lane Kiffin went to Florida, what's about to happen? Because I think you and I both know what's definitely about to happen is Florida's about to skyrocket to the moon. I just think that they've had so many bad things on the field. The way that they're constructed, their athletic department is running things, it's not good enough. Now, I know that a lot of people in their fan base want to fire their AD, specifically the way that he's handled some of the coaching hirings and firings in football. Joe, I just have to admit, they hired Billy Napier too soon. They thought LSU was going after him because Glenn Guilbeau wrote something in an Outkick saying, "Here comes Billy Napier and LSU," and they got scared. Florida can be so much more, man. And when I grew up and I remember the Steve Spurrier, Urban Meyer days, I remember teams that were absolutely ruthless. Any good coach gets that program, football-wise, screw this NIL thing. Because, Joe, you know what this really is going to come down to in the end? They're going to pop Florida with what they just popped Florida State with. And who knows? You know,
I think this is a little deeper because the Florida State allegation was that Alex Atkins drove a kid to a collective manager's house to get him money.
That's a coach.
Right.
Billy Napier's not being investigated. This is an athletic department issue.
Here's the biggest thing with me. No matter Billy Napier's connection to the issue, and I said this in the open, alluding to this. Jeremy Pruitt was fired from Tennessee for cause, and they didn't have to pay him. And I'm starting to see a lot of similarities here where we've got an investigation coming, and if there's enough proof that it's clear that he had some sort of involvement and that Florida's probably going to comply with any requirements and, heck, are probably going to be overly generous in sharing what they need to give to the NCAA so that it makes it easier to fire Billy Napier. You're absolutely right, everything you've just talked about here, that Florida has the capability to be as good as an LSU, to be as good as an Alabama. They have had dynasty runs. They can be as good as a Georgia with the right head coach. And they made too early of a hire on Billy Napier. It is not the same era anymore where you can hire a G5 guy to work out in the SEC right away. That shit does not work. It was a bad hire from the jump. And while there might be some time for him to turn it around, it's too late. The best thing for them to do here, if you fire him, you don't have to pay him shit. And the money that you save allows you to go hire somebody better. And what happened in Tennessee's case, they fired Jeremy Pruitt, hired Josh Heupel, who would have been a highly sought after head coach on the market, and they were able to spend that money there.
Can I tell you something?
What?
I don't think Florida has the if Florida fires Billy Napier for cause, I will come on this show unless it's proven that he's blatantly guilty. I'll retract anything that I'm about to say. That's a human being that you're doing that to. Just because he's sucking on the field, because you're literally putting future jobs on the line for himself. Hold on, please let me land here. You're putting Joe. You mean to tell me that Kirby, because they've worked on the same staff, Kirby wouldn't make him an analyst?
Yeah,
he can't do that if you're going to try to set this guy up for something he may or may not have had conversations in. Like, let me give an example.
Whoa, okay.
Let me give an example. Did they really catch Harbaugh really actually himself doing anything? Because let me tell you how inner workings of coaching works. I promise you this. Now, it always falls under the head coach. I'm not saying that. Joe, you know the coaches that we talk to on a day in, day out basis. And I just telling you how athletic departments run. There are a lot of times the head coach has no, like, especially like a Harbaugh, has any idea what his recruiting staff or lower staff in his department is doing. He can't. There's too much to deal with in today's game. I mean, he's having a conversation with a kid about NIL and starting time. How does he know all the time what Connor Stalions is doing? Now, I think he knew, okay, because of the play sheet and all that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm saying. It's funny when people are investigated for stuff and all of a sudden it's saying fire for cause. Look what Harbaugh's trying to put in his contract. Florida has, don't be petty is what I'm trying to say. Don't be petty into the sense of you made the bad hire. Your collective was the one that was out here working the numbers. Now, Joe, you know what's going to be ironic?
Okay.
What if all this reporting and shit? What if it was all fake? What if that number is bullshit?
First of all, I doubt that. I doubt that it was fake because there's no way this was all covered so tightly. This was all covered for
By
the
whom?
longest time by like every major sports media outlet.
Yeah. Let me tell you something.
This wasn't. Look, I hear plenty of rumors. We all hear plenty of rumors that we don't talk about on this show about things that happen.
I'll make you a $20
that shit
bet.
Was public.
I'll make you a $20 bet right now. It's not $13 million.
It doesn't matter what the amount is. Look, at the end of the day, I understand what you're trying to say. I understand what you're saying here with it's kind of slimy for Florida to do that, but I'm willing to bet with the top quarterback recruit in your class that is important for changing the trajectory of your program. If Jaden Rashada ended up at Florida, it saves his damn job. If Jaden Rashada suited up and played a little bit this year, like we got to see him at Arizona State, that buys him another year. Because then you can at least kind of say, well, look, we got this really talented kid who's about to be a junior in 2 years. And still, he's more physically gifted than Graham. He's more gifted than Graham Mertz. He's a very, very talented young man, and they missed out on him. He knew if there was any findings of anything happening, he knew he had to have been a part of these conversations going after the most important position, the most important player in his recruiting class.
I agree with that.
So I don't think that there's any, if Florida if the NIL collective is found guilty, there is zero chance that Billy Napier is not involved in this to some extent. Allegedly, we got to do the Pat McAfee here. We have to say allegedly. We can't fully commit to just saying something, but allegedly he would have to be involved in it to some extent because that is an important. This isn't a low 4-star offensive lineman. This isn't a 3-star linebacker. This is a 5-star quarterback that changes the trajectory of your program. He had to have been involved to some extent. And we also don't know the details. We really
agree
don't
of
yet.
Him knowing, prove it that he knew.
Well, that's my point. And we don't have the details, so we don't really know yet, but I'd be willing to bet.
I'm just going to get to again my point.
Okay.
And my last thought on this, okay? Florida has to get their shit together because when stuff is popping there, when everybody is aligned and lockstep and key, okay? Joe, again, we know what they can be. We've seen what they can be. It's not a joke there. Like, where they got now technically 4 Power 5 schools in Florida. Doesn't matter because when the Florida Gators are rolling, they're the team in Florida. Like, let's just be real because they've had too many dynasties since the 80s. Okay, when shit is going on there and it is right, okay? My whole thing is I'm not – screw the Jaden Rashada thing. You got to get, number one, a better AD in there. I know that they don't really care for him too much. And then get lockstep and key with what you're going. If the Florida AD wants to go to A&M, let him do it. Let him do it. Okay? I just look at this and see a team like Florida that could be so much more than they are right now. Joe, do you remember – even though I thought the Florida documentary that came out during the summer was going to be more about Aaron Hernandez and that whole scandal, the way that they marketed it, even watching it, though, just the documentary in and of itself was good in the sense of, bro, look at the intensity and the insanity of what those teams went in under Urban. That was insane. I just look at this and say, man, you got to get back right. You got to stop making bad moves.
They got to, I think that's the biggest key here. And once Billy Napier does get fired for either this NIL related issue or for performance on the field, whatever ends up happening, we're going to end up spending a lot of time talking about this. But the next hire it can't be a Billy Napier hire. You can't pull this shit. And
No doubt.
I feel like Dan Mullen was what they wanted and hoped it could have been. Didn't end up working out. But they got to go steal somebody from another SEC school. You know,
Well,
maybe they should try and steal like Brent Venables if they can't get Lane Kiffin.
No. There's only one person that you need to go after.
Lane. What if he can't get Lane? What if he does this again? What if he turns him down again? Another big job again.
I just tell you my mindset, and you know this a little bit about me. I think, okay, my brain doesn't comprehend that way. Like when people say, "Well, what if you don't get him?" No,
he was not even brought up in the Alabama job conversation.
That's different. That's Bama and Florida is a different culture. Florida's culture, huh?
He was at Bama. He's got more connections to Bama.
Under Nick, he can't be the head guy there. Look, there's a different thing in the South that people don't get.
Okay,
but Joe, I'm just telling you, I've lived here my whole life. Lane can't go there. They got to do whatever it takes. If he wants $15 million, okay. Because Joe, they are a program that.
Wait. But as we've seen though, Alabama just did this. You got to have multiple options because you're going to go down the list and you might end up on option 4.
That has nothing to do with Florida. Can I tell you why? Because nobody wanted to succeed Nick. And Florida can outbid Ole Miss. There's a difference going up Alabama versus Texas and getting Sark. There's a difference between going up against Alabama and Florida State, which are you seeing with the money that they are spending right now in the portal? Florida State is not a joke. Ole Miss cannot get the money that, Joe, they spent $42 million, actually, 2 installments, so $84 million for a baseball stadium. In college baseball.
I just don't think it's that cut and dry, simple to say, Nick Saban's there, go get Nick Saban.
No.
Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffen's there, go get Lane Kiffin.
Don't make it an option. Like in business, I'm not going to make it an option that they're not going to say yes. I mean, say no, excuse me.
I don't know if it's that easy.
Shit, you better go make it easy. Hey, before we move on, okay, my grandpappy once told me something. You want to hear it?
What is it?
Bullshit walks or money talks and bullshit walks. You pay the man enough money, he's gonna walk. Joe, he almost walked to Auburn. That's a tougher job.
I just don't know if it's that cut and dry. I really don't.
You better find out how cut and dry it is.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.